My name is Drew Waldron, and I am on with educator, researcher, and activist Jeff Duncan-Andrade. Jeff, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Now, Jeff, you started your career as an educator in underprivileged communities, and further down the line, it led you to founding a community school and founding an education group. What was your experience like at the very start of your career, and how has it led you to where you are now?
I started teaching in Oakland, California when I was 20 years old. I couldn't even buy a drink, which I often needed after my early teaching days. When I started, I think I was like a lot of young and committed and hopeful educators in that I thought that what was missing in schools like the ones where I taught and the ones where I grew up in was teachers like me, right? And I would once I got there, then, things would get better. What I quickly realized was that that wasn't the solution, that there was something deeper going on inside of the school system and the institutions of public schools that was so deeply flawed and deeply committed to being reproductive of those same patterns. That really then helped me to understand really two things. One, just how hard teaching is. And I think that there's a sort of national misunderstanding about just how challenging and complex it is to show up every day as a classroom teacher and be effective. Have spent the last 30 years of my life really trying to bang on my craft and honor the incredible educators that are in our school systems right now and the best educators that I had in my life. Because what I learned as a teacher is just how much work they had to put in to be able to be effective with me and my peers.
What advice do you find yourself giving educators the most in 2025, specifically around defining success academically?
I spend a lot of my time, one, asking educators and school systems to fundamentally rethink why they do what they do. Like, I don't feel like there's enough purpose conversation. So, and what that means is that we presume that the purpose that we have designed for our public school system in this country is the right one and that it's a good one. And I challenge that notion. I think the purpose of public education that we currently maintain and uphold in this country is flawed. And that's why we get the results that we continue to get and sort of wring our hands over, oh, gosh, again, like, and I think that has to do with us not really examining the foundation of the project. And so the way I talk about this with educators is I ask them, I just did a talk in Tacoma a couple days ago, right? And I asked the audience, I said, how many of you own homes? 60% of the people raise their hand. It kind of regionally depends on where I'm at, because if I'm in California, like 5% of the people raise their hands. But whatever, people raise their hands. And I say, okay, well, when you bought your home, what was the first thing you had inspected? And of course, people shout out foundation, the foundation. And I asked him, I said, well, why'd you have the foundation inspected? Why didn't you check the double pane windows or the HVAC system or the new roof or the state-of-the-art kitchen or the hardwood floors? Why do you start with the foundation? And they say, because if we invest in all those other things and we don't have a solid foundation, then we're just throwing good money after bad. And that is what I think is happening in our public education system, that we have a foundational problem. And so a lot of the work I do first is to have people like revisit, what is the purpose of this project? Like, why do we take children from their families by law for 13 consecutive years for 6 to 7 hours a day? Why do we do that? Right? And let's start there. And then whatever our answer is to that, then let's make sure that our school day, our curriculum, our budget, our pedagogy, our assessments match that purpose. And I think that the reason that teachers are often so discontented and so like off balance is because their purpose, which I think is often a right and righteous one, is often misaligned with the institutional purpose of public schools, which is often, right, not about developing critically, civically engaged democratic citizens. It's not about developing problem solvers and critical thinkers. It's not about developing young people that are well like well inside themselves, but also well as community members. And what it is about is often it's about developing compliance, right? It's about developing a sort of pathway into your career or your profession. And I'm not against any of those, but those should not be the core foundational purposes of a public education system in a pluralistic multiracial democracy. And so we've gotten out of balance, right, on the things that we prioritize in schools. And we've kind of chased down that rabbit hole under the auspices that this is going to lead to greater academic rigor and success. And there is no data that suggests that that's happening, right? In fact, the data suggests the opposite is happening. And because like I really value research and data as a way to inform and drive the kinds of things that I'm prioritizing as a practitioner, but also as somebody who has the opportunity to influence the national discussion,